Arlington National Cemetery is a place of quiet reverence. It is a vast, green expanse dotted with endless rows of white headstones, each one marking the final resting place of an American hero. Visitors walk these hallowed grounds with a sense of solemn respect, reading the names of soldiers, sailors, and presidents. But among these thousands of graves, one stands apart, not for the fame of the person buried there, but for the profound and invisible danger it contains. This is the grave of Richard Leroy McKinley, un especialista del Ejército de los Estados Unidos. His simple headstone gives no hint of the extraordinary story beneath the soil, a story of a catastrophic accident and a silent, radioactive threat that makes his tomb arguably the most dangerous grave in the world. The cemetery has rules, of course. Visitors are asked not to touch the monuments, to speak in hushed tones, and to stay on the designated paths. These are rules of respect. However, the warnings associated with McKinley's grave are of a different kind altogether. They are not about etiquette, they are about safety. While no official sign spells out the danger, the records of his burial tell a chilling tale. The groundkeepers and staff who know the story understand that this is one plot of land that must never be disturbed. It is a permanent quarantine zone, a tiny island of lethal energy locked away from the world, a silent sentinel guarding a secret that came from the dawn of the atomic age. To understand why this specific spot is so perilous, we have to travel back in time, away from the peaceful hills of Arlington to the cold, isolated plains of Idaho. The story is not one of battle in a foreign land, but of a different kind of war. A war against the very laws of physics, waged inside a top-secret government facility. Richard McKinley was not a combat soldier in the traditional sense. He was a pioneer on a new and dangerous frontier, working with a power that humanity had only just begun to understand and was not yet prepared to fully control. His fate became a permanent, chilling lesson about what happens when our ambition outpaces our wisdom. The real mystery of McKinley's grave is not what you can see, but what you cannot. It's the imperceptible energy radiating from the remains buried deep below. This energy is relentless, invisible, and will persist for centuries. The grave is more than a memorial, it is a containment vessel. It is a carefully constructed prison designed to hold a deadly force, a testament to a tragedy that left behind a legacy of permanent contamination. The story of this grave serves as a stark reminder that some dangers do not fade with time, and some wounds, once inflicted upon the world, can never truly be healed. Richard Leroy McKinley was just a young man, only 27 years old, when he died. He was serving his country, like so many others buried in Arlington, but his duties were unique. He was stationed at the National Reactor Testing Station in the remote desert of Idaho Falls. On the night of January 3, 1961, he was part of a three-man crew working on a small experimental nuclear reactor known as Stationary Low-Power Reactor No. 1, or SL-1. The reactor was an Army project, designed with the hope of creating small, portable nuclear power plants that could provide electricity to distant radar stations and military bases in the Arctic. It was a noble goal, born from the era's boundless optimism about the peaceful uses of atomic energy. The work was often routine, involving maintenance and preparation for restarting the reactor after a shutdown. That fateful night, something went terribly wrong. The exact sequence of events remains debated, but the outcome was catastrophic. One of the crew members, in an action that took less than a second, manually pulled the central control rod out too far. This single small movement instantly caused the reactor to go prompt critical. An immense surge of power, 1,000 times greater than its normal output, flashed through the core. In a fraction of a second, the water inside the reactor vessel boiled into steam, creating a massive explosion that blasted the top of the reactor through the building's roof. This event was the first fatal nuclear reactor accident in United States history. The explosion killed 2 men instantly. Army specialist Richard Legg was impaled by a piece of metal, and Navy Seabee Richard Matejka was also killed by the initial blast. Richard McKinley, however, survived the immediate explosion, though he was gravely injured and thrown into a radiation field of unimaginable intensity. When rescue teams, clad in protective gear, finally reached him over an hour later, they found him alive but unconscious. He was so saturated with radioactive particles that his body was emitting more than 500 roentgens per hour, a dose that is lethally toxic in just a few minutes. Radiation, in simple terms, is a form of powerful invisible energy released by unstable atoms. These atoms are like tiny, wound-up tops that are wildly spinning out of control. As they try to become stable, they shoot out tiny particles and energy waves, like microscopic bullets. When these bullets hit the cells of a living body, they tear through them, shredding DNA and causing catastrophic damage. McKinley's body had absorbed so many of these radioactive particles that he himself had become a source of intense, deadly radiation. He was no longer just a man. He was a walking, breathing, contaminated zone. He died from his injuries shortly after being rescued, his body forever changed by the invisible storm he had endured. The challenge of burying Richard McKinley was unlike any other in the history of Arlington National Cemetery. The primary concern was not honoring a fallen soldier, though that was important, but containing the severe radiological hazard his body now posed. His remains were so dangerously radioactive that a normal burial was completely out of the question. Anyone who came near his body would be exposed to life-threatening levels of radiation. A special team had to devise a funeral plan that was more akin to disposing of high-level nuclear waste than to a traditional interment. This was a grim and unprecedented task, requiring layers of protection to shield the living from the dead. The solution was a burial process of extreme caution, involving a series of nested coffins. First, McKinley's remains were sealed inside a waterproof, zinc-lined casket. This casket was then placed inside another, larger metal casket, which was also sealed shut. This double casket was then lowered into a third container, a vault made of reinforced concrete, several feet thick. The entire assembly was like a Russian nesting doll of containment, each layer adding another barrier against the relentless energy emanating from within. The goal was to lock the radiation away, ensuring it could not seep into the surrounding soil or water table for centuries to come. Even with these precautions, the burial itself was a hazardous operation. The funeral was small and brief, with family members kept at a safe distance. The gravediggers and military personnel handling the heavy shielded coffin had to work quickly to minimize their exposure. Once the massive vault was in the ground, it was covered with a thick concrete cap before being buried under several feet of earth. The grave was designed to be a permanent prison for the radioactive isotopes fused with McKinley's body. It was built to withstand the tests of time, weather, and even minor earth tremors, ensuring that its lethal contents would remain undisturbed. The reason for such extreme measures lies in the long-lasting nature of the radioactive materials. Elements like strontium-90 and cesium-137, which were absorbed by his body, have half-lives of about 30 years. This means that every 30 years, their radioactivity decreases by half. While that sounds fast, the process takes centuries to reach safe levels. Even today, in 2025, his remains are still significantly radioactive. If the grave were to be opened, for example, by an unknowing construction crew or a future archaeological dig, the consequences could be disastrous. A cloud of radioactive dust could be released, contaminating the air, soil, and anyone nearby, creating a new and terrible emergency on America's most sacred ground. The story of Richard McKinley's grave is a powerful and sobering lesson about the ambitions of humanity and the double-edged sword of scientific progress. In our quest to harness the power of the atom, we unlocked a force of immense potential, promising clean energy and technological advancement. However, the SL-1 accident revealed the dark side of this power. It showed that even with the best intentions, a single human error, a momentary lapse in judgment, could unleash a catastrophe with consequences that last for generations. McKinley's tomb is not just a memorial for a soldier, it is a monument to the profound responsibility that comes with wielding such elemental forces. His silent grave in Arlington serves as a constant, physical reminder that not all dangers are visible. We live in a world of threats we can see, storms, conflicts, and diseases. But the atomic age introduced a new kind of peril, one that is invisible, odorless, and operates on a timescale far beyond a human lifetime. The radiation locked away in McKinley's grave is a perfect symbol of this hidden danger. It is a quiet threat that does not diminish with the passing of seasons or the changing of guards. It simply waits, a patient and enduring legacy of a mistake made over 60 years ago, teaching us to respect the forces we cannot see. The tragedy of SL-1 prompted significant changes in reactor design and safety protocols, making the nuclear industry safer today. But the core lesson remains relevant. As we continue to push the boundaries of science and technology, whether in nuclear energy, artificial intelligence, or genetic engineering, we must proceed with humility and caution. We must remember that our ability to create can sometimes outstrip our ability to control. The story of Richard McKinley is a warning against arrogance, a plea to remember that nature and physics have laws that cannot be broken without consequence. His sacrifice, though accidental, became an enduring lesson written in concrete and lead. Ultimately, Richard McKinley's grave embodies a profound truth. Some stories must never be forgotten, and some places must never be disturbed. It is a testament to a young man who served his country on a new and perilous frontier and paid the ultimate price. His final resting place, a fortress against an invisible enemy, calls on us to remember the hidden costs of progress and to honor the memory of those who, like him, became unwilling martyrs to the dawn of a new age. It stands as a timeless warning, urging future generations to tread carefully as they reach for the stars, lest they unleash forces they cannot contain.